Hello and welcome to Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. What's the deal with the SAT? The SAT stands for the Scholastic Aptitude Test. It is a test that typically high school juniors and seniors take in order to get into college. It's supposed to measure the likelihood that the applicant will succeed at whatever level of difficulty the particular college entails. It is, along with the ACT, an extremely important test in terms of getting into colleges and in terms of getting financial aid. In fact, it's the most important factor in deciding what kind of college you get into. So there's a lot of bad advice given to high schoolers about the SAT. And I'm going to debunk some of that bad advice for you and tell you, just in a general sense, how you should prepare for it. You may hear people say, maybe guidance counselors or other sorts of counselors, that you should really only take the SAT maybe up to 3 times, and you should take it the spring of your junior year. This is very typical advice. That's completely wrong, and don't listen to it. You're going to make a huge mistake if you listen to that kind of advice. You should be preparing for doing well on the SAT well in advance of the first time you ever take the test. And you should take the test as many times as you possibly can before you apply to colleges. And there's very good reason for that. A lot of high schoolers think that they don't have to prepare or study for the SAT. They just wing it, or they think they're so bright or intelligent, it'll just automatically show up in their SAT score. And that generally does not happen. You have to prepare for this test. This test, generally speaking, consists of a math section and an English section. So increasing your vocabulary, increasing your reading comprehension will really pay dividends in terms of the English score for your SAT. So when you're reading through things in general, when you run across a word, you don't know the meaning of it, look up the definition, even on your handheld or in a dictionary. Don't pass it by. Don't pass that word by without understanding what it means. Look it up. So you can build up your vocabulary and read a lot, because reading will improve your reading comprehension. Half this test is about vocabulary and reading comprehension, and the other half is about mathematics. And the nice thing about the mathematics part is you can learn the mathematics part, whereas reading comprehension and vocabulary is a long-term skill. It takes time to build that up. So you got to practice that for years before you take this test. But you got to put a lot of time into developing reading comprehension and vocabulary. All right, so why should you take this test as many times as you possibly can before you apply to colleges? The reason is because of two things. The first being that the SAT can be wildly erratic when it comes to any given test. The test can be easy or it can be hard, and it can be tested or scored easy or scored hard. You could take the same person with the same knowledge, have them take 2 different SAT tests at 2 different times, not having done any different preparation, and there could be a wild swing in this person's score. anywhere from 80 to even 100 points. Take the same exact person, same knowledge, same circumstances, give them two different SATs, two different dates. You could have a 100-point swing in difference, which means if you want to get the highest SAT score that you possibly can, and that is what you want to do, your best odds of doing that would include taking the test as many times as you can. Because some of these tests are going to be graded much more easily than other ones. So you want to get in on as many of the easy graded SATs as you can. The problem is you don't know which ones are going to be easy and which ones are going to be hard until you get your score back, and then you realize it. So some of them are going to be the easier ones, and you don't know which ones. So take as many as you can, and you're bound to hit a few of them. And that's where your prime SAT score is going to come from. That when the hard test that you took and your scores are lower, you're not even going to worry about that. So take it as many times as you can. You want to get as high a score as you can. Colleges want their students to have as high an SAT score as possible. It means they get the best students, the most intelligent students. It helps with their rankings. Um, it's a predictor of how well they will do in college. Colleges don't want to accept people who fail out of that college. They want a high graduation rate. So they want to make sure that if they accept you, that you're going to succeed here and you'll get a degree in 4 years. There's no better way to guarantee that than by making sure that the applicants have high SAT scores. And the better the college, the higher the SAT score average among the applicants ends up being, because the best students with the highest SAT scores uh, tend to gravitate towards the best schools, and the best schools get their pick of the best students with the best SAT scores. So naturally, the average SAT score among the best schools happens to be very, very high. So if you want to get into some elite colleges, Ivy League colleges, top 25 colleges, national university colleges ranked by U.S. News and World Report, you better have a great SAT score or you're not getting in. If you want to know basically what SAT score you need in order to get into any particular college, you should go to PrepScholar.com. Go to PrepScholar.com, or better yet, go to Google and search PrepScholar and then the name of whatever the college is. You'll get the PrepScholar website with that particular college. Scroll down to the bottom and look for the admissions calculator. Now, the admissions calculator has two variables on it. It has a GPA variable, and then it has an SAT score variable. So you can set the variable to the number that you want, and it'll tell you the percentage likelihood you have of getting into that college. And you can play with the variables, and you can see how an increase in the GPA can affect your likelihood of getting into this school, or how the increase in an SAT will affect the likelihood of you getting in this school. You can also go to each particular school and look at their statistics and see what their average SAT is for their last applicant pool or their last acceptance pool, and then see maybe where their middle 50% is. That's a good indicator. So every school has a range on the SAT score. Let's say it's 1,500 to 1,200. So everybody they accepted had an SAT score somewhere here. And the college may tell you what the median SAT score was for the applicants or for those who were admitted. Let's say it's 1350, or they may tell you where the 50% range is. That is the middle 50%. That is where the 25 percentile and 75 percentile is. So it might be something like this. So you might have the middle 50%, which is from the low 25 percentile of those admitted to the 75 percentile of those admitted, where the range is 1250 to 1400. And this gives you a really good idea of where you need to be if you want to have any realistic chance of getting into this college. You want to be in this range. You're down here and you're not likely to get in. You're up here, wow, you're very likely to get in, at least in terms of the SAT, provided your GPA is, as good. So SAT is extremely important. It's the number one factor schools use in determining who gets in and who doesn't get in. It's the first basis upon which they weed people out. And a lot of schools will say, well, we take a holistic approach towards our applicants, and we consider all sorts of factors. And, that's true. But at the end of the day, when you look at these elite schools, people they admit have very high SATs. And the average SAT ends up being something like, a 1350. So, it may be holistic and they may be looking at all sorts of factors, but if you're not there, you're not likely to get in. So the SAT is extraordinarily important in terms of getting into colleges. Now, I'm just talking about the SAT, but the same thing would apply to the ACT. All right, so how do you prepare for the SAT? Well, some people hire consultants, SAT prep courses, tutors. Those are great ways to prepare for it. The sooner you prepare for it, the better off you're going to be. Some schools, especially private schools, are very good at teaching their kids throughout the entire 4 years the specific information and the skills that they need to do well, specifically on the SAT. So if you happen to be going to one of those sort of preparatory high schools, you're in luck if that's what they do, because they really churn out a lot of graduates who get high SAT scores. But if you're not in that category, then what can you do? Well, the first thing is start preparing well in advance of taking your first SAT. And you can go to khanacademy.com and get free preparation. So you go to khanacademy.com, you get an account, and they have a whole section on preparing for the SAT. You use that to prepare. You can even link it to your College Board account, which is where your SAT results are stored. And Khan Academy will know from your SAT results from the College Board website what areas you missed and what weaknesses you demonstrated on your SAT scores, and it can prep you on those particular areas that you're weak on. So this is it's free and it's a great resource for preparing for the SAT. So what I would do is I would spend 1 hour a day, every day of the week, preparing for the SATs. And the sooner you start preparing for the SATs before you take your first test, the better off you're going to be. And during the entire period of time when you're taking the SAT, you should also continue to prepare 1 hour a week using something like khanacademy.com. Your first SAT tests are hopefully not going to be nearly as good in terms of scores as your last ones or your later ones. So it's a continuous preparation, and you're continually looking at those things you didn't do well on and improving your skills at those things so that the next time around you'll do better on the SAT. But you got to understand that the SAT can be wildly erratic. So you may have prepared really, really well, but the SAT you took ended up being one that was a tough one. It was scored hard, and you ended up losing 100 points on your score. And it's not because you did something wrong. You didn't. You just happened to sit for a harder SAT score or a harder SAT test. That's why you got to take as many as you can. One reason. So maybe the next time it'll be an easier one, and you'll be able to boost your score up with that test. So it's a game of chance and odds. So the more tests you take, better. Now these colleges, they use something called super score when they look at your SAT. Generally speaking. And what super score means is the college will consider your SAT score as a combination of the best math score that you got on any of your tests in combination with the best English score you got on any of your tests. So you can combine the best test scores you got in each section, and they don't have to be from the same test. So let's say you took the test 6 times, and on the second test, you got your best math score, and on your fifth test, you got your best English score. Well, you get to combine those best scores together, add them together, and that will give you the SAT super score that the college considers. Now, most of these colleges don't even require you to show them all your SAT scores, let's say all 6 tests. And you shouldn't do that. If they're not demanding that they see all the tests, don't show them all the tests. Just show them the 1 or 2 tests necessary in order to get that highest super score, and leave it at that. There's no need to give a college any indication that you could get less than that super score because you showed them tests that you didn't do well on. Don't show it to them if you don't have to. So most colleges allow you to use a super score. And again, this is another reason you take the SAT as many times as you possibly can, because you're combining 2 scores based on 2 different tests that you sat for. So the more tests you sit for, the greater the likelihood is that you're going to score higher in one section on one particular test than the other section on a different test, and then the combination creates a higher score for you. So it's all about the super score. And there's good reason for allowing a super score, because the SAT can be wildly erratic. There could be 100-point difference between the test you took last week and the test you took 2 weeks before that, for no good reason whatsoever. The SAT can be very erratic like that. And when you're dealing with a college where you have a spread that's, let's say, only 150 points for the middle 50%, a 100-point swing could be the difference between getting in and not getting in. So this is a big deal in terms of being admitted to a college. So super score, you got to remember this idea. This is what you're after, the highest super score you can possibly get. All right, so take 1 hour a day, pick an maybe an hour in the morning after you wake up in the morning, and go on Khan Academy. And Khan Academy will let you practice each section and subsections of each section. So you can practice, let's say, the math section today, and tomorrow you'll practice the English section, and you can practice different sub areas in each of those general areas. What you can do is you can just try to get, let's say, 10 questions right in a row before you move on to a new subdivision area. And then you try to get the meter on Khan Academy to go all the way up to 4, which means you've mastered that material. And if there's anything you got wrong in Khan Academy, you try to understand why it is you got it wrong and what the correct answer is, or the correct the mathematics that you need to know. And if necessary, you can go to YouTube videos, other Khan Academy videos, or other tools, even people, math teachers or whoever, to try to find out what the correct answer was and how it is that you can fix the errors that you made. When you're trying to create as high a super score as you possibly can, every question counts on the test. So when you take an SAT test, the last thing you want to do is not answer a question, because you don't get any points for a question that's not answered. So even if you don't know the answer, guess. You might be right. Who knows? At least you get a chance at some points. But ideally, you want to be able to take an SAT test certainly not leave any questions blank, and and hopefully you don't have to guess at any of them. Your best odds of getting the most likelihood of you getting a question correct is if you read the question and you understood it and you made a reasoned decision about your choice of correct answer. That's your best odds. Guessing, you might only have a 25% chance of getting it right. But if you're reading it and rationalizing through it, your odds might be, you got a 75, 80% chance of getting it right. So time management is extremely important during the SAT. So you need to watch, you need to know when you're just about to run out of time. So if you have any questions you haven't answered, you can guess at them. But ideally, time management is incredibly important so that ideally you don't have to guess at questions. You've managed your time such that you've been able to get through all the questions, reasoning through them within the time allotted. That's how you get your highest score. And as far as the super score goes, you know, when you get higher and higher in the SATs, the smaller point differences make a big difference. There's a big difference between a 1350 and a 1400 or a 1400 and a 1430. So an extra, well, when you start getting up into higher ranges of SATs, an extra 10, 20, 30 points in your super score can be the difference between getting into an elite college and not getting into an elite college. So the later you get into taking the test, after you say you've taken 3 or 4 tests already, it starts to really become about adding on a few extra points and trying to add on 10, 20, 30 points on a particular section. And you build your super score up that way. Um, and, uh, and that's how you get the highest super score you can. And so when it comes time for you to finally start applying to colleges, you got maybe 8 SAT tests that you took, and you tell the college only about the two of them with the combined highest super score, the highest super score. Um, Another strategy some people use is they may focus just on English and take this next test, SAT test, and just focus on English because they're trying to get their English score up as high as possible. And they don't really worry about the math. And then the test after that, they focus on the math section in order to get the highest math score that they can. Um, so because it's a super score, you can do that. And provided you take the test at least twice, you will have your best English score and your best math score, which you combine for a super score. But if you take the SAT like 8 times, you can see how this strategy could really help your super score if you focus on a particular on math or English for a given test. Be careful though; you can't just do poorly on the other section because it may end up being a red flag, and College Board may red flag your test and say this is your ultimate score is so different than your previous one that either you were cheating or your previous one you were cheating, and they won't let you use either one of the tests. So you can't just completely abandon the other section. You got to do decently well, but you can certainly focus your studying on one particular section for each of these exams. Another thing you should do is not only go on Khan Academy, but you should also take practice exams. The SAT College Board gives you practice exams, old tests that were given, and you can take one of those, and that'll help you. You take it under test conditions, somewhere quiet, under the same conditions, the same time limits, and that'll help you get into that sort of exam environment so that you can manage your time. You can practice managing your time properly so that you answer all the questions after considering them without having to have to guess, or God forbid you run out of time, you don't fill in all the ovals. And maybe you do that one practice exam a month. And as you get closer to the actual date that you take the test, the SAT, you might want to start doing that practice exam once a week. And I would definitely take a practice exam at least within a week of the actual SAT, so you can really get a feel for time management and that pressure and that sense of taking a standardized test in a controlled environment. It's very helpful. And the standardized test, of course, can also uh, tell you how you're doing. Where are you generally in terms of your score? And are you near where you want to be? Are you studying enough? Maybe you need to study more because you're not close to the SAT level that you need. The SAT is an extremely important test. It's more important than anything else. Your GPA is very important, and you can go to PrepScholar and you'll see how important your GPA is, but your SAT is even more important. Because these elite schools, everybody's got a 4.0. It's expected. In fact, if you don't have a 4.0, that's a red flag right there. Why don't you have a 4.0? But everybody's got a 4.0. So how do you distinguish yourself among a stack of other applicants who want to get into the same elite school? Well, that's how you distinguish yourself. You got a much higher SAT than some of these other people. That's why you may get in and they don't. The SAT is also extremely important for financial aid. Many schools give much more money in scholarships um, because your SAT score happens to be higher. So it can have a big impact on financial aid and how much you and your parents end up paying for college. So a higher SAT score is really money in the bank in terms of financial aid. There's nothing you can do that is worth more in terms of cold hard cash than a high SAT score uh, in terms of getting financial aid for a college. A lot of these elite colleges that require high SAT scores, if you get in, their financial aid is need blind. I'm sorry, it's need based. So they'll give you whatever money you need to get in and to go to their school. So high SAT, but they want a high SAT. So you get the high SAT, you get in one of these generous schools, and you're going to get overwhelmed with the amount of financial aid they give you. That's worth a lot of money to you. So the SAT not only gets you into a great college, it's also worth a lot in terms of financial aid and money. Okay, so I can't overestimate or overstate the value of a high SAT score to high schoolers who are going to college. Um, and the more competitive and the more elite the college is, the more important this high SAT score is. And there isn't going to be anything more important to a college, especially elite college, than this SAT score, despite what they may say. Because the truth is, you look at their average SATs, and if you're not in that range, you're not getting in. So beware of bad advice regarding the SAT. The SAT is extremely important. It's also very erratic, and you need to take it as many times as you possibly can, and you need to start preparing for it well in advance of the first time you ever take an SAT, and you got to continue studying for it and preparing for it the entire time you take the SATs. And that could be a whole year until you start applying to colleges in the fall of your junior year. You might start taking the SAT as a sophomore in the fall, and that could be a whole year of preparation that you go through, getting up in the morning and studying for an hour on Khan Academy. But it's well worth it. The SAT is the key to getting into great colleges and getting a lot of financial aid. All right, I hope you learned something, and take care.